I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. Yeah. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so that we reach that level in 2027. So on top of the funding of 2.5% that I've just announced, we will be spending 2.6% on our defence from 2027. But, Mr. Speaker, we must go further still. We will also set a clear ambition for defence spending to rise to 3% of GDP in the next Parliament. Yeah. And so today I've decided that we will fund the initial increase in defence spending by cutting our spending on overseas development, moving from 0.5% of GNI to 0.3%.
Did you see that? Did you?
With superpower alliances switching sides and conflicts in Eastern Europe and the Middle East coming to boiling point, Starmer's announcement that he's increasing defence spending at the expense of foreign aid is the latest example of how the war-mongering right seem to have a bottomless pit of money for war, but can't find the money to properly fund public services or help out freezing pensioners. Keith's declaration in the House of Commons was followed up by a press conference during which the Prime Minister dodged questions about how Trump may have influenced his decision, and also, more alarmingly, as to whether this was in anticipation of the country heading to war. There were also one or two problems with the figures Starmer mentioned at the dispatch box earlier today. Let's see what's happening.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. Yeah. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so that we reach that level in 2027. And we will maintain that for the rest of this Parliament. And let me spell that out, Mr. Speaker. That means spending £13.4 billion more on defence every year from 2027.
What?
£13.4 billion more on defence every year from 2027.
Those figures don't add up, but I'll come on to that in just a moment.
But, Mr. Speaker, we also face enemies that are sophisticated in cyber attacks, sabotage, even assassination. And so our intelligence and security services are an increasingly vital part of protecting both us and our allies. So on top of the funding of 2.5% that I've just announced, going forward we will recognise the incredible contribution of our intelligence and security services to the defence of the nation, which means taken together we will be spending 2.6% on our defence from 2027.
For the record, the United Nations recommends spending 2% of GDP on defence, but it gets even worse, with Keith planning to raise it even further if he wins a second term.
But, Mr. Speaker, we must go further still. I've long argued that in the face of ongoing generational challenges, all European allies must step up and do more for our own defence. So, subject to economic and fiscal conditions and aligned with our strategic and operational needs, we will also set a clear ambition for defence spending to rise to 3% of GDP in the next Parliament.
Yeah. That would make it 50% higher than the recommended United Nations level that I just mentioned earlier. Starmer then went on to hold a press conference. Let's see a little bit of what happened there.
And so today I've decided that we will fund the initial increase in defence spending by cutting our spending on overseas development, moving from 0.5% of GNI to 0.3%.
So not willing to tax the rich yet again, instead choosing to cut overseas funding, and this is the man who's going to be prattling on about immigration for the next 4 years.
This is dreadful.
I want to be clear. That is not an announcement that I'm happy to make. I'm proud of Britain's pioneering record on overseas development. And we will continue to play a key humanitarian role in war-torn countries like Sudan, Ukraine, and Gaza.
Gaza isn't a country, Keith. It's in Palestine. Palestine.
In tackling climate change.
No, Keith, you're not doing nearly enough to tackle climate change and continue to vilify people who protest while calling for you to do more. He thinks things like nuclear power plants that won't go online for decades and non-existent carbon capture technology will get us to our CO2 level targets, and is pushing for things that put us even further behind, such as the proposed third runway at Heathrow Airport.
That is one big pile of shit.
And supporting international efforts on global health challenges like vaccination. And we will do everything to move towards a world where we can rebuild our development capacity. However, the realities of our dangerous new era mean that the defence and national security of our country must always come first. That is what I campaigned on in the general election. It is what we are delivering today. A new approach on defence.
Not so much a new approach, but the same old capitalist crap that goes hand in hand with war and global suffering. Starmer was then asked about whether Donald Trump had any influence on his decision by Sky's Beth Rigby. She said, "You sound like a Prime Minister on a war footing. Should viewers be alarmed?" Keith refused to flat out deny that and only said it was a significant moment and that this generation has to fight for peace. Fight for peace? Where have I heard that before? As for the timing of this announcement, the Prime Minister says that, quote, "In our heart of hearts, we've known for the last 3 years that this decision has been coming since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine began. But Starmer says the last few weeks have accelerated his planning and that he's taken the decision today, quote, as a matter of duty and responsibility."
I think I can smell shite.
As I said earlier, one or two things don't add up. Firstly, Keith said that this was the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. It's not known exactly what measure he's using for this, but government spending is usually measured as a proportion of the size of the economy by GDP. UK defence spending using this measure has been on a downward trend since the mid to late 80s, according to figures from the Institute for Fiscal Studies. While there have been a few years that have shown increases, these have been one-offs and so not considered as sustained rises. The UK's estimated NATO qualifying defence spending was £64.6 billion in 2024, equivalent to 2.3% of GDP. That means adding an increase of 0.2% of GDP to defence spending would be roughly £6 billion in today's money, not £13.4 billion. But with someone like Rachel Reeves doing the sums, it's easy to see how they can get mixed up. The Prime Minister also suggested a cut in the foreign aid budget from 0.5% of GDP to 0.3%, and that would fund the increase in defence spending. But £13.4 billion would also be roughly equal to the entire overseas aid budget from 2024-2025 of £13.3 billion. Either the Chancellor's got the figures mixed up on a calculator, or they're just making them up as they go along. The BBC's asked for verification from the government on the figures for the basis of the £13.4 billion figure, but I wouldn't hold my breath if I was you for a response from Keith. Please let me know what you think about this announcement in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks so much for watching. Please hit the subscribe and thumbs up buttons to help us out on the algorithm. You can now join the channel with a membership for just 99p with some great perks for you to enjoy, including exclusive content and early viewings, plus lots more. And you get to join the list of awesome people who support the channel that you can see on your screen right now. Hit the join button or follow the links in the channel description. If you'd like to make a one-off contribution, then please hit super thanks on the video or follow the link to our Buy Me a Coffee page where you can help to show solidarity and support the channel for just the price of a tasty hot beverage. All contributions are greatly appreciated. Thanks again everyone. My left eye will be seeing you soon.